Both of the other ships have been destroyed.
2 down, 1 to go.
Data report.
The anomaly has nearly collapsed.
We're losing attainment.
Goodbye, Jean-Luc. I'm gonna miss you. You had such potential. But then again, all good things must come to an end.
Just like heroin, I feel you coursing through my veins. Oh, I will strive to kick this addiction. I swear I'll never kick again. Won't ever kick again. No, this addiction can't seem to live without you. This addiction, now going clean. This addiction, I go through it.
Hello once again, Popheads. And if Tom is blatantly violating copyright laws, that can only mean he no longer gives a fuck. And that is no disrespect to our main band, Dirty Sweet, for always providing the great music for us over the years. But this little bonus show deserved a special little something extra. And you're probably wondering, like, what the fuck is this guy talking about us now? He's been on the show. He's like, put like 4 episodes this week. What the fuck is this guy doing? Well, I've talked about it before. I've talked about it in the past. Like, something big's coming up. There's going to be some changes, some things we need to talk about. And that's what we're doing now. Because, as Q told Jean-Luc Picard, all good things must come to an end. And we have reached the end. The end as you know it, of the TomCast POPCast. And that is said with a heavy, heavy heart, as it's the last thing I wanted to have happen. But 2022 promises to be a year of change. And change is a good thing. And change is something I'm actually really, really looking forward to. But part of this change will be a new schedule for me. And I don't really know where my free time is going to lie. And I don't really know where it's going to be. As far as how often I can make a podcast and how often I can be available to comment on things on the ready. And for that reason and for another reason, which is in 2022, I have other aspirations to try and work towards. And that's going to require some of that free time that I just spoke about. And so the idea of trying to maintain 2 podcasts with upwards of 4 episodes a week just became too much, and something had to give. And again, I reluctantly admit that I cannot maintain this schedule. I cannot maintain the 2 podcasts anymore in light of these changes, and it makes me sad. I love this podcast. I love the TomCast POPcast, and I love this sort of like weird smorgasbord of a podcast that we've created, where one week we're talking about, something in cinemas, and the next week we're talking about something on streaming, or next, we get on like topics about comic books and Cobra Kai, and I mean, we're just all over the place. And I think a lot of times for a podcast, that's not a great thing to be so scattered in your focus. But for us, it made me happy because I have a diversity of interests, and the show is named after me. But again, things have changed, and it's unfortunate, and I'm sad about it. And the podcast is also never designed to be a solo show. It was always supposed to have a guest host, a co-host. I actually originally wanted like a sort of like a round table, but it became harder. It became really hard to round up people to do that. So we settled in on a co-host, a rotating table of co-hosts. Which reminds me, I want to thank everyone who stepped up, came on this podcast, had the cojones to hang out with me. Big thanks to our good friend Roger Smith. Big thanks to Jeff Nail and Casey Nail for being on the show a bunch of times as well. Our good friend Reagan from the Coach G podcast, his brother Ryan and Rob who've been on, my brother Mark who's been on the show. I want to say that's it. Cody and Tabitha, they've been on the show. They've been awesome as well, and they got the one celebrity who's ever come on the TomCast podcast, Ethan Embry. So huge thanks to them. And so let me kind of lay out what's happening here. The podcast is ending as you know it. It is no longer going to be a weekly show. It will probably come out sporadically. You will probably still get episodes on occasion. So please, I urge you not to unfollow, not to unsubscribe, because you will get shows eventually. What's really going to happen is the show's going to transition, perhaps temporarily, perhaps for the time being. Maybe it's a short-term thing, maybe it's a long-term thing. I don't know just yet. We'll see how it shakes out. The show is going to go and become a Patreon-only show for supporters of MandoVision. Maybe that doesn't make sense. Maybe it does. I'm still kind of seeing how this is all going to shake out. But I've already talked to the Patreons about this. I've already shared the information with them, so they can pull their support if they want, and no hard feelings. But we're just going to shift the Patreon, turn it into the MandoVision podcast Patreon, because that's a show that is designed to be solo, and is a show that I can kind of do fairly quickly, because it just requires me to talk about Star Wars, which is easy. Star Wars is always in the front of my brain, and I have a decent base of knowledge for it. So that show will continue. The Patreon becomes the MandoVision podcast Patreon, and the exclusive Patreon content will be new episodes of the TomCast POPCast, whether they want it or not. So we'll have to see if there's a lot of pushback from any new MandoVision Patreons who come on board who are like, I don't want to listen to this shit. So we'll have to evaluate that later. But that's going to be what happens. That's the transition for the TomCast POPCast. We're going to be in a Patreon-only show for MandoVision, at least one show a month, maybe more. Just depends on how things shake out with the schedule and if something annoys the piss out of me. Like I already told the Patreons, I was like, I'd love to sit down at the end of season 2 of Picard and recap the whole thing with our good friend Reagan. But if he doesn't want to come on a Patreon-only show, then I don't blame him. I understand, and I'll just spout off by myself about Picard. So don't worry about that, because I'm going to have hot takes on that shit. Because as excited as I am, I'm nervous too, and God knows what we're going to get in season 2. Fingers crossed. So yeah, that's what's happening. That's what's going on. The show isn't going away necessarily, but it's not going to be a weekly show. It will show up sporadically. I'd still really like to plan things out ahead of time and get shows out around Halloween time, because I've always enjoyed the Halloween shows. I'm sure we'll still end up dropping reviews from Marvel movies on occasion. Probably not with any great regularity, but at some point maybe we'll chime in about them. I just don't know. The future's sort of up in the air on the hows and whys and whens of things. But yeah, again, I want you all to know this. I did not come to this decision lightly. I kept trying to change my mind about it, even up to this morning. I was like, do I really have to do this? Do I really need to step away from the show and end the show? And, in a more ideal world, I would have had a regular co-host, and I could have handed the show off to them, and they could have kept it going. Ideally, someone named Tom. But that was not to be. And so this is a potentially temporary change, but it's potentially a long-term change as well. The show will keep its numbering going on Patreon, so that when you get new episodes into your feed, you may get oddly numbered ones, just depending on what I deem is appropriate for the populace to have for everyone else. Because, again, it's going to be a show that's exclusive to Patreons, so you don't want to piss them off by starting to put things out in the main feed again. So we're going to try and work on that, figure out that balance of making everybody happy as best as we can, and yeah, we'll see what happens. And as I said, 2022 is the year that I hope to have some other things to talk about, some other things going on in life, maybe some other things to share with everybody. I just need more time in my schedule, and unfortunately, doing all the podcasts has sort of come at a price. And it is, again, with a heavy heart that I announce that after, hopefully you've already listened to episode 200, but that's potentially it as far as like a weekly podcast goes, at least for now. And that's sort of I'm sort of dancing around the issue here. Like I'm sort of ending the podcast, but I'm not ending the podcast. I'm sort of trying to keep the show alive in some capacity, maybe it'd just be easier to go cold turkey and just stop the TomCast POPcast. But again, there's enough things in pop culture that piss me off that maybe I need to keep it on just so I can vent my frustrations when something annoys the shit out of me. I'm looking at you, Star Trek. I'm looking at you. So, again, don't unsubscribe, don't unfollow. Shows will probably pop up in your feed sporadically, and you can still listen and enjoy. And I thank you in advance for that continued support. It means the world to me. If you're already a Patreon, you've already heard this, and you already know the details, what to do over there. If anyone is considering being a Patreon for Mandovision, by all means, come on board, and we'll have a good time. But yeah, I mean, by and large, like, this doesn't affect too much of your day to day. Just know that you won't get a show on a weekly basis anymore. Okay, it'll be sporadic. It'll be on occasion. There are some podcasts that work that way, and they're okay working that way, and that's what we're gonna have to do for the time being. Again, I'm not exactly super happy about it, but it has to be what it has to be for right now, and I appreciate your support on this. It's, again, not something that came too easily. Extremely reluctant as I'm continuing to dance around the idea of just even, again, ending the show would have been simpler. I'm trying to keep it alive in some fashion. So that should show you how reticent I am about canceling the podcast in general. So yes, we will transition to a Patreon-only show for Mandovision Patreons. You do not feel obligated if you're not a Patreon already to do that. Don't feel obligated at all. If you're a Patreon already, please, I told you already, pull your support if you need to, if you want to. If you don't want to support the Mandovision, I get it. I understand. We're no hard feelings. We're all still friends. Do what you got to do, but make sure you do it before January 1st. And again, if you are a Patreon and you haven't listened to the Patreon-only episode I put out on Wednesday, go and do that. I get into a little bit more detail there. I don't want to go into it too much with the non-Patreon listeners right now. Thank you. All right, so that's it. I realize I'm sort of releasing a bit of a bummer here on Christmas Eve. So maybe I'll wait. The plan was to release this on Christmas Eve, but it's kind of a bummer episode, right? So maybe I'll hold off on. I don't know. I'll probably just put it on Christmas Eve anyways. Y'all need to know. Y'all need to know. You're my friends. You're my listening audience. You've been amazing supporters of the show, and I cannot thank you enough for the years and years of support. For those of you who've been with us from the first episode, which was an educational experience, very much so. We started this podcast because I just wanted to talk about Avengers stuff. I was really excited about Avengers stuff, and I was like, man, I gotta start this podcast when Infinity War comes out, and we did, for better or worse. And it was like a 3-hour podcast. It was insanely long. We got a little bit better. But, listening back, I think you all know, especially if you've been there since day one, the show was kind of a hot mess for the first, 4 or 5 months, right? It was, about 4 or 5 months, right? Because, the schedule got real sporadic, so I got really busy at San Diego State. And we didn't have a real big format to work on. And, there was a learning curve, for sure. But I want to say by, the mid to late teen episodes, we started to find our groove and get our feet under us. And, there's a lot of episodes in the show's run that I'm really, really proud of. And again, I'm really, really proud of everyone who came on board to be a part of the show. So I thank you all again, whether it's Roger or Mark or Reagan, Jeff and Casey, Cody and Tabitha, Reagan, Ryan, Rob. Everybody who stepped up came on the show. I hope you'll still come on in some capacity in the future. Like I said, whether we're still doing Patreon-only shows or if we ever get back to being a weekly podcast. Who knows what the future holds, I guess is what I'm trying to say. The undiscovered country, if you will. Wink, wink. Who knows what that reference is to? Yeah, you do. You know. You listen to this podcast. You know what that's a reference to. Yes. So, one more time, I thank you all so much for the support. I hope you will continue to support us by staying subscribed and following the show so that you can listen to new episodes when they do arrive in your feed sporadically. If you do want to consider becoming a Patreon to Mandovision, so you can get the new episodes of POPcast when they come out on the Patreon feeds, I thank you in advance. and know that the tiers into Patreon aren't changing. You can still there'll still be a $1 level and a $5 level, and $5 gets the show, $1 gets a shout out. That stays the same. Maybe I'll reevaluate that if there's some kind of if you all scream from the heavens at me and tell me how pissed off you are and that I'm a real son of a bitch for doing this. Maybe you'll persuade me to change some of the tiers a little bit. But yeah, by and large, everything else is going to be the same. Yeah, and I'm sad. I'm very, very sad. But I'm glad we got to end on episode 200 on reviewing the show that again I was absolutely delighted by because I never wanted to phone in episodes of the show. I never wanted to half-ass it for you all, and I think more often than not, I did just that. I gave it my all. I gave you guys everything I had. There are some episodes that are better than others. I'm not going to lie about that, but I don't think I ever really phoned one in. Maybe you can tell me otherwise. You'd be like, well, on episode 47, you were kind of like half in, half out there, bro. And you know, maybe I'll have to go back and listen to that one. But no, by and large, I'm extremely proud of this show, of this podcast, and of the amazing listeners who have supported it over the years. And I thank you all so much from the bottom of my heart. Again, deep down, I hope the show comes back weekly at some point. I don't know if that's the case. I don't know if that'll happen. But to keep it going, the only situation I could see that made the most sense for what I talked about with my schedule, my new schedule in January, and my free time moving forward, was to make the POPcast a Patreon only show for supporters of Mandovision. If you think I'm missing something, please, you know how to reach out. You know how to find me at this point, and we can talk about it, and all things are on the table. But yeah, that's what's going on. That's what's happening. That begins January. Well, actually, that begins now. The Patreon changes in January, but yeah, you're not. This is it for weekly shows. Again, stay subscribed, stay following, and you'll get new ones when they come out. But yeah, this is it for the weekly stuff. You know, we might do big season reviews for things when they wrap up. You know, Disney Plus shows. All the Marvel stuff, whatever. We'll probably do series reviews, not episode reviews. We'll just have to see how it goes. So yes, again, I've done it 1,000 times already, but thank you for all the support over the years. And I hope you'll continue to support me in some fashion or another moving forward. Hopefully you like Mandovision. That's the best news I can hope for at this point, is that you're going to be continued listening to Mandovision, and you'll just stick aboard over there, because there's a lot going on over there. We got Book of Boba Fett, we got Andor coming up, we got Kenobi coming up, season 3 of The Mandalorian coming up. A lot of Star Wars to talk about in the future, so we'll be busy over there. That show may change a little bit as well. That may become a once-a-week show as opposed to the 2 episodes I'm doing a week. But because it's a solo show, I can schedule that a little bit more easily than the struggles I've had over the last couple of months trying to get people to come onto the TomCast POPCast, because this was a show that was never designed to be solo. But it has become solo because my schedule has become rather untenable. And that is what it is. Again, I'm not trying to make I'm not trying to make this all poopy and sad. Thank you for the support. We will be here in some fashion or another in your feed. If you want to be a Patreon to get more regular episodes as bonus shows for Mandovision, by all means, I welcome you aboard, and I can't wait to hear from you on that. And if Pophead members don't want to support Mandovision, you can pull your support now. Do it before January 1st. I still love you, and I thank you for the support you gave us over the years. I will talk to everyone soon. Happy holidays, Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, and please stay smart, stay safe. And one more reminder that please, if you know anybody who's down in the dumps this holiday season, reach out to them. Just say hi. Make sure they're doing okay. It doesn't take a lot of effort. It's so easy to get in touch with people these days. You can just even send them a text message. It could be a real life preserver for somebody who is a drowning in the seas of depression in the holiday season. I love this time of year, but not everybody else does. So check on your friends and family members who can get kind of low, and again, keep them in your. If you're a religious person, keep them in your thoughts and prayers. But if you're not, just again reach out to them and keep them in mind. Okay. Thanks for all the support. Thanks for everything over the years. We'll still be talking in the future, just a little bit more sporadically. So again, one more reminder: don't delete the podcast from your feed. Stay subscribed, stay following. Shows will pop up occasionally, and it'll be all good. It'll be a lot of fun. All right, take care of each other, take care of yourselves. Ciao, babes.